and especially engineering, we're dealing with tangible entities. But in the case of software, we're dealing with the abstract, you know, and we try to build a product from the abstract, and in that sense, we also get eluded by the fact that we are building, you know, we are creating building blocks, as opposed to in engineering where these building blocks already exist. They're tangible entities that we're building from. In the case of software, it is not like that. We don't know that we need to create the correct and precise building blocks. We just go ahead and start working with what we have, because, you know, we have a tendency to, you know, think in the abstract from what we already know, and so we start from what we know and we start building. And the things that are available from what we know are inadequate in the case of software. So this leads to several, you know, failures in software, you know, due to this particular inclination of ours. In software, there have been many concepts. One of them, object-oriented programming, is a concept, and all these concepts they're trying to quantify, to visualize something, you know, that it does not exist yet. And they start from a concept, visualize to create a building block so that we can build from. Object-oriented programming tends to, you know, apply the visualization of trying to create objects that perform certain functions, and, you know, they, you know, operate on data. So that concept, of course, is the building block for when we create other things within the software engineering, you know, domain. We create programs, we create entities, and so on and so forth. But we find out that starting from that concept leads to inadequacies. So because of the inadequacies of object-oriented programming, we have derived several other concepts. Some of them, the component object model. Now, the component object model also tends to quantify, and it does so by, you know, starting from you know, processes that we have that are tangible software, you know, products called processes, or DLLs, for example. It tends to, you know, derive a form of communication between these DLLs. So when these DLLs communicate and interact with each other, we derive a concept around them, give the process and protocols for their communication. And because we're dealing with a tangible concept, we have more, you know, success at this level, as opposed to object-oriented programming that is sort of abstract, you know, in relationship. So the more abstract we start from, the more tendency there are to failures. And service-oriented architecture deals with another concept of quantification, but the building blocks here are looking at things in forms of services that interrelate with one another. That is another abstract concept that we try to apply within the domain. And you know, it is more abstract, you know, as opposed to the component object model. Now, when we're developing software, we because of the fact that we're dealing with minute and abstract entities, you know, we have to make them work. We have to provide an implementation in the realistic, you know, domain, which is, you know, the hardware of the computer, and so on and so on, the equipment that we're using. Now, we use code. We use a programming language, which also is an abstract concept, which has nothing to do with what we're trying to deal with. We're trying to adapt it, to align it with the realities that we're dealing with. And because of that, you know, correlation causes things that we don't expect, and, you know, leads to failures in software. And when we start from an abstract design in the form of you know, a software architecture, we start from abstract concepts as well that has nothing to do with the final implementation. But because we tend to see things in the abstract from what we know, you know, we start from that level and try to implement them in coding, which, of course, a programming language also is far from the actual, you know, reality that we'll be dealing with. So we're dealing with several levels of, you know, deviation from the reality that we really need to face in software development. Now, the key to making things work correctly is to minimize the scope of specialty. We find out that the more we have manageable, manageable entities to create, we start from something that is more manageable, that is at the lower